when it's time to figure things out, I just felt like we all wanted to figure it out so bad that we just like I don't know, like I feel like teams are punching us in the mouth first. We're kind of not reacting the way we wanted to. Instead of just having teams punch us in the mouth, I think if we just go and punch them in the mouth first, then we'll be perfectly fine.
Michigan freshman point guard Frankie Collins talking about punching people in the mouth, being the aggressor. Welcome in Afternoon Live, the Maize and Blue Review, as we get it going on this chilly Wednesday. Michigan hoops tonight. That's why we have Daniel Dash, the beat writer for Michigan hoops for TMBR, with us here on camera, on the line. Daniel, how are you?
I'm doing well. What about you, Dennis?
I'm doing good, man. I'm waiting for the big basketball game tonight. Wondering if, this was a stretch of Maryland home games. Tonight's game against the Cats and then the Cornhuskers next week. This was not, if you're looking as a season ticket holder, like a trio of games, like, wow, man, it's going to be a great stretch and anything. But I did see that there were a lot of cameras making their way around the arena last week, and people surprised with the showing up as empty seats or whatever else. Maybe a few more after a couple wins though here tonight. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that gradually as this team turns it around, people will start to reinvest themselves. I just think after the November and December that they turned in, I think interest was at an all-time low compared to the preseason expectations they had.
Yeah, I mean the students if you're a rabid Michigan basketball fan, do you have a case to say, you know what, we have a bad basketball fan base, or is this just like par for the course? We just mentioned it, like interest dropped after the preseason expectation. Do you think people have a complaint, I guess, about the lack of turnout, especially last Tuesday?
Not among the students. The Maze Rage is pretty consistent, filling up the section behind the benches and then up behind the backboard. It's the townies and the real folks who are falling behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I liked your headline from the story you just wrote, the symbiosis of Hunter Dickinson and the rest of the offense. I was like, wait a second, do I know what that means? I looked it up. Nice biology term. It worked really well. And, I assume you wrote your headline there. Is that's true, right?
Yeah, and I think obviously it's a word that I haven't heard since freshman year of high school when I last took bio, but I think it captures this pretty well. I think you see the inflection points coinciding. Dickinson had a pretty underwhelming first month and a half. Since then, 4 20-point games in his last 5 performances. I think he's really starting to put it together offensively. The jump shots there, he's hit 4 of his last 6. He's shooting 39% from 3 on the season. And the volume is up lately. He took, really 1 or 2 threes the first month of the season. Now he's shooting 1 or 2 per game. He's making 1 or 2 per game. I think that just adds such an element to Michigan's offense, and where it makes the biggest impact is in Michigan's spacing. I think the Wolverines are just set for success when guys have room to operate, and when Dickinson can hit the pick and pop 3 from the top of the key, it puts defenses in conflict. And I know that's a word that a phrase Josh Gaddis uses a lot, but I think it applies here in basketball. If you have to commit to stopping a guy coming off a ball screen or stop a pick and popper, it's going to stretch you really thin. And when you're stretched thin, you can't double team. You can't collapse on Dickinson in the post. And if you do, you're sacrificing leaving a guy like Caleb Houston, Devontae Jones, Eli Brooks open for 3. And I think that's where Michigan's finding the most success right now, putting defenses in a really tough position where they can't stop both.
Yeah, I think you explained it well. As I guess I'll put myself as a casual fan, watching the games for a minute. Sometimes you just watch and you just see things clicking. I mean, the shots are going in, and wow, Hunter Dickinson looked like he did last year. Man, guys are cutting, and he's finding guys, and they all feed off of the one another, which was your point on that. I don't know, is it a chicken and egg thing? Like if Dickinson does this, well then the players are getting into better looks, and if the players are knocking him down, then Dickinson's feeding off that. I mean, or is it all just like you mentioned, feeding off one another?
Yeah, I don't think there's a middle ground, and I don't think that's a problem because I think the way Michigan is built and this Michigan team, they have shooting. And Brooks is a great shooter. Houston's a great shooter. Guys who have been in rough patches. Dickinson's a dominant post player. But you can't have one without the other, but it's so much harder to have one without the other. I think that's the way I'd put it. And I think that now that Michigan's kind of found a way to keep both of them, quote unquote, on at the same time, they're finding a lot of success on offense. this is a team that's putting up big efficiency numbers over the last 2 or 3 games, and I don't think this is just a hot streak. I think this is sustainable. I think they found a brand of basketball that they can replicate night in and night out. It's something that works against pretty much every variation of defense, and I think that if Michigan can learn and make this a permanent thing, so to speak, it's something that can really turn this season around for the better.
Yeah, so I would say, some people would say, look, it's only been 2 games, but it feels like they turned the corner. Certainly, it looks, that Caleb Houston looks like he's turned some kind of corner with his shot. I mean, and you can say, well, it only had one way to go, but that was winning on the road. It shows you how much it can do for you, and then just what Frankie Collins was talking about, being aggressive. And I know they like to go back to that Illinois game when they were shorthanded and just how, fierce they were playing and desperate. I think that's part of it. Like they just decided like, look, it's now. I mean, we've got to play all out desperate basketball or, we're not making any tournament, that includes the NIT.
Yeah. Dickinson said something in the Indiana post game. He said that Juwan told them that they were playing for their season on Sunday. It's a really extreme thing to say on January 23rd, but with the position Michigan has put itself in and the hole that it's really dug itself, you look at this team, they don't have a signature win. They didn't get one in the non-conference play. They didn't play all that well at Illinois. Granted, they were shorthanded and let that game kind of devolve towards the end. They had a hiccup at home against Minnesota. I mean, this is a team that's really set itself back. So I think you're looking at a very little margin for error, and I think Michigan realizes that. It's created a sense of urgency, and as Frankie Collins said, it's created this desire to come out and be the aggressors. I think the phrase he used was, "We want to be the ones punching the other team in the mouth, not getting punched in the mouth." And I think in the last 2 games, you've really seen that.
Yeah, and I'll pull from Juwan Howard's deck here. I think tonight's a must win. I mean, if they don't go out and win this game here, you just start looking at it. Sure, I mean, they could win the Big Ten tournament and all those kind of things, but the step forward that they took and the corner turning and all this kind of talk, if they don't beat Northwestern, then you're like, wait a second, and you just start looking at the games. They could have 2 signature wins if they played Michigan State and Purdue, but those games are in limbo. We're not 100% sure they're going to reschedule those. That means they only have 12 games remaining. You just start doing. People ask like, how many wins do they need? Well, they had one that was canceled. Usually, you're thinking about 18 wins and being 4 games above 500 are kind of the baseline to even start about being in there. But because of the cancellation, or there was a cancellation against Indiana, or 7-5 in these games, you just start looking at that's 16-12. I mean, that seems pretty dicey.
You're on the bubble.
Yeah, they need some then quad ones, certainly signature wins that you mentioned. It would be nice to be able to get a chance against Michigan State and Purdue again. But you just start going through them and you see like, tonight's game, Saturdays would be nice, but, you don't expect that. Next week against Nebraska. I mean, they have to win these games.
Yeah, and I think this part of the schedule, as you just mentioned, is particularly interesting because right now they've built some pretty clear momentum. I think they saw a lot in themselves in that Illinois game, translated it to the Maryland game when they got their bodies back with Dickinson and some other guys. Indiana, you get Brandon Johns back. Tonight against a pretty bad Northwestern team. As an 8-point favorite, you got to go out and take care of business. You got to defend your home court in the Big Ten. Northwestern is towards the bottom of the conference, but one thing I'll say is a lot of those losses are single-digit losses. Every Big Ten loss they have is a single-digit loss besides their last game against Purdue. They got run out of the gym. They lost by 20. But if you keep the trajectory going tonight, you're looking at a solid 3-game winning streak going into a rivalry game. Anything can happen at Breslin. I think Michigan's probably better on paper. I think Dickinson sees a matchup there that he could dominate against a guy like probably Bingham. Yeah. And I think Dickinson's got the big physical advantage there. If Michigan can knock down some threes, that game gets interesting. You come home, you take care of business against Nebraska, you turn that into a 5-game winning streak going to West Lafayette. This is a very different outlook. And I think this next week or week and a half is going to tell us a lot about this Michigan team and the direction they're heading in.
Yeah, Northwestern beat Michigan State last Saturday, so on the road. So you don't need to go too far to like they can't sit around saying, it's Northwestern. It's going to be an easy one. They better not be looking at it like that. And I'd be interested to see how you look at the rivalry games. I mean, Tom Izzo, it is a rivalry game, and Izzo always has his team however you want to look at last year's plan or not. I mean, he always has them in the tournament. They're right up at the top of the standings here. Michigan's in need. I mean, the resume is very thin. I mean, they need that signature. I mean, I'll put everything into that game on Saturday, thinking that they'll probably come up short, but they need to, they need to have a good showing Saturday. If we just skipped ahead there for a second.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the matchups are there. I think there's a lot of places where they can exploit the Spartans. Obviously, tough to go out on the road and do it. It is a rivalry game. You're going to get a lot of emotionally charged play. Probably get some refs swallowing their whistles. It's going to be a physical game. It's one that can go either way. I wouldn't write Michigan off. I think it's there for the taking. I wouldn't call them the favorite by any means, but I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibilities. I think Michigan has what it takes to go in and get a win at Breslin. I think we'll learn a lot tonight against Northwestern about whether Michigan is on a path that's sustainable. I mean, you drop tonight's game and you're set back a really long way. Confidence goes back to a pretty low state going into East Lansing. So I think this week in general, in these two games, and just really finding continuity. I think last week was the start of something, but this week will be telling in whether or not it's something that's sustainable and something that if they rattle off a couple big performances and they do find that kind of continuity, it's really going to change the way this season is seen and the way this season is, what looked like a crash course for the NIT can suddenly become a viable path to the NCAA tournament as, maybe even an 8 or 9 seed.
How about a couple quick predictions from you? Somebody walks up on the street, even though it's cold. They say, Dash, Michigan going to make the tournament. What do you say?
Yeah, I think this team does have what it takes to make the tournament. I think this team will find a way into the tournament. Might not be pretty, but I think it starts this week.
While you're in the prediction mode, they might as well just take you over to football. It's Jim Harbaugh coming back as the head coach. What's your gut there?
Yeah, I think he is. It's pretty telling that he hasn't had a formal interview with any NFL teams yet. I know even on our boards, Josh has mentioned that some of that NFL interest might be overstated. I think that anyone who's been reading the Maize and Blue review, anyone who's been following along with Josh's reporting is pretty in tune with the situation and feels pretty good at this point that Harbaugh will be coaching on the sidelines in Ann Arbor this fall.
You understand why people are nervous, though, now with 9 openings there in the NFL. What about Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator? It's an interesting situation because John, the head coach of the Ravens, was like, said, hey, Jim, I got a defensive coordinator for you. He had an excellent season, and now Wink Martindale is out, the defense coordinator for the Ravens, and there was a beat writer for, I think, the Baltimore Sun who put out a beat, and he had McDonald's name on there. That was a long setup to ask you the question about Mike McDonald. Do you think he returns at Michigan as a defensive coordinator?
I'd be surprised if he didn't. I think John taking back his gift to Jim would be a little upsetting for Michigan fans. But at the same time, it's a perfect fit for McDonald if he is looking to make the jump back to the NFL, if he is looking to be a long-term NFL defensive coordinator. He knows the system. He knows the talents. A lot of guys he's been around for a while as an assistant. I believe he was a linebackers coach in Baltimore before taking the Michigan defensive coordinator job. He was always seen as a rising star within the industry. You talk to anyone from the Ravens, really nothing but glaring reviews. And I think that if you're a Michigan fan, you're probably crossing your fingers that some of these other older, more veteran seasoned play calling candidates for the Ravens knock their interviews out of the park this week before they get a chance to get McDonald on the phone.
All right, 2 super quick ones for you. One, who's going to be the Dolphins coach? Brian Dable. Looks like, he was the OC.
That's who I want.
He was at Alabama. That makes sense to me. That's who you want? That's who you think it is?
That's who I want.
All right.
I want Dable. I love the way the Bills run their offense. I love the way he uses Josh Allen. Granted, there are a lot of differences between Allen and Tua. Another guy I like a lot is Mike McDaniel, the 49ers offensive coordinator. They've overcome a lot. He's had one of the better offenses with mediocre quarterback play. Dolphins have had mediocre quarterback play for 20 years. So you bring in someone who's used to it and they can overcome the challenges. Another name I've seen is Vance Joseph, the old Broncos head coach. He was a Bears defensive coordinator when they were dominant under Khalil Mack. Not my favorite, but it's a name I've seen. But I'll go with Dable. I want Dable.
Interesting theories there. All right, you're going to the game tonight? What time are you going to get there?
6:30 tip, so probably around 5:15. Eat a little something, watch an hour of warm-ups.
Not bad. All right, hey, we appreciate your time. You covered everything and stayed longer than I thought you would, so we do appreciate that. Enjoy the game. Stay warm. We look forward to reading your coverage.
Thanks, Dennis. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, see you, Daniel. There he is, Daniel Dash, talking some Michigan basketball with us here. A couple other items as well. A couple things I'm going to cover. Talk Michigan basketball. Going to get to Jim Harbaugh, and I'll give you my opinion. Sorry, on Mike McDonald. A little bit on recruiting as well with the Michigan recruiting spotlight. I always talk about recruiting every day. Something as we keep stacking up the days here. What is today? Wednesdays. That means we're a week away from National Signing Day. So there you go. We'll start there on the recruiting spot. Rivals, which we are a part of with Amazing Blue Review. We have our Wolverine Den posting board. You come aboard there. People are talking about coaching, so and anything going on with Michigan. So looking at where all the coaches are on the road, looking at what might be ahead for McDonald, Harbaugh. I mean, it's always going on all day. Most of the night and 7 days a week. So get involved there. But Rivals came out with, they ranked the players and they came out with their final ranking, the 250. And there were a couple things that went on to adjust their rankings. They had two, was their Under Armour game, and then there was a Polynesian Bowl. And, had some Michigan players participating in there. And some guys took some big-time jumps, taking a look at it. And, nice. If you're a Michigan fan, you like players to be rated as high as possible, and that, somebody out there looking at them, liked what they saw and adjusted their rankings. And with Will Johnson, the corner, the 5-star, went all the way up to number 5 overall, which was really impressive. Damani Jackson, who we talked about so much, and for good reason. I mean, he's an outstanding corner and everything else. And he's at Alabama, USC, Michigan, childhood friends, blah, 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 blah. But he was always way, way, way up there. And then Johnson was a little bit further behind, but Johnson overtakes him and ends up number 5 overall. I thought that was interesting. Michigan is in and wants the offensive tackle out of Seattle, Josh Connerly Jr., although Connerly might blow past next Wednesday because the 5 teams that he's interested in all have new coaches and new coaching staffs. And with the uncertainty with Michigan, he's not ready to do anything. And when, you're a 5-star there, you can call out of your own shots. And, Michigan would and will wait on him. So we'll see. Derek Moore, who had a couple sacks and was the MVP of one of those bowl games or the All-American games that the high school guys play in, Moore was awesome in that game. And he vaulted up 70 spots. Talk about a high riser, man, pushing him way up the board, and ended up being number 51 overall. And I won't go over the whole list and everything else, but 2 other players for Michigan end up in the top 100. The wide receiver, Darius Clemens at 91, and at 95, Keon Sabb, safety, who was flipped from Clemson. So that Michigan recruiting class looking pretty good. And they'll put the finishing touches mostly coming up next Wednesday, and they're still hoping for the running back out of Texas, Paul, that that they'll be able to get him, and that might be a Wednesday special, signing day special, and that's fine with me. And then after that, I'll just be, let's see what happens with Connerly. When's he going to make a decision? It'll be sooner or later after signing day, but maybe he'll do something on signing day, but listening to his latest interview doesn't sound like it. So there you go with the Michigan recruiting spotlight. Over to Jim Harbaugh and Mike McDonald. With Harbaugh, as this plays out, I think you get tired, you get frustrated, you get sick of it, from either side, any rumor, any speculation, any idea, anything else. You wonder why. Well, why isn't he just go out there and get this done? I get that. I get that myself. So as much as coaches like to use the end around and be evasive with reporters and the fans, like, we're not going to show you the spring game because you'll be able to, see our defense, and in Western Michigan, they'll have to account for, all of these kind of things. And they do the same thing with injuries, and, like, well, we're not going to tell you if he's playing or not. We'll see. And, all coaches do it. And you know what? All of them are mostly full of it. Like, all of that, it doesn't really matter. But, all the coaches do it. So, people say, well, all the coaches do it. Are all of them wrong? Yeah, it's stupid. It's mostly stupid. And so what I'm doing is I'm throwing us all a bone or whatever, however you want to put it. Say, look, you know, if every single thing, affects the football program and team, then why would you do this? If you're Jim Harbaugh. And what it comes down to is, everybody's got to take care of themselves, and negotiations and the money and the ego and all of that other stuff. It's not always the team right up at the top in Michigan football. You got to take care of yourself, and if you have the opportunity to go out there and do whatever you want for whatever reason you want, you can do it. And it's just always it's always something to remember here. And look, you know what? It's going to be a really happy day, and it's going to be like Michigan winning a football game if they get Jim Harbaugh back, and he's all aboard. And it didn't hurt Michigan last year. This whole dance, and it's frustrating while it goes on. It's just, to me, I just tell the coaches when they're all over there talking about, well, we don't want to tell you, and this is going to hurt that, and it's going to hurt that. You know what? What about when you're out, doing whatever you're doing, and you're not, and he can say, oh, I already had a contract. We all know. Let's not, this dance. It's just one of these things that you just got to put up with. Just like when and it's silly too. I'll tell you what, does it affect more a coach leaving people out there in limbo on the recruiting side, or you got two quarterbacks and one of them might not play, but we're not going to tell you anything about it because you got to prepare for both. Does any of it matter? It's just a blast back on the coaches that act like so much of every single thing matters. Well, no, it doesn't. And just like this part, what matters is that he comes back to Michigan. That's what matters. And when you have a certain amount of cachet built up, and you can go out there and do whatever you want for whatever reason you want, well, you go out there and do it. Doesn't mean anybody has to like it, but that's just my feeling here today. Yeah, it does sound like you got some frustration. But it's just one of these things like, yeah, you know what? Michigan fans, there's a reason to be nervous. There's a reason not to be nervous, back and forth. But with 9 teams out there, I honestly, do I have a hard time believing with 9 openings, if Jim Harbaugh really wanted an NFL job, I feel like he could get it. But does he really want it? He wants the perfect job, and he wants the certain amount of control, and he wants the certain amount of money. That's why I continue to think that he's coming back to Michigan, because I think he'll get the most money. He'll have the most control. And also, the fans right now are all about him as well. So all of and his family, another one, everything that you're looking for there, unless he's just got that itch to say, I'm going to jump. I want to. I've done all I can. I mean, so, you can easily see why he could take that door, but I do think all the things that are important, the things that still feels like, Michigan's going to be the choice. All right. And as far as Mike Macdonald, people like that makes no sense why Macdonald would go back to the Ravens. It makes sense to me that Wink Martindale was there and that they already figured out what they wanted to do with that position. It doesn't seem like, hey, let's move on from Wink and freshen this up, and let's go ahead down and grab Macdonald. That just doesn't make sense to me that John Harbaugh would do that. Now, if Wink was, he up for a head coaching job, maybe he'll get one of those. And then, it was one of these things. It was a mutual separation, and so you can understand why you would put Macdonald down there. I don't think the big roadblock. Daniel Dash mentioned it, and everybody does mention this when they talk about Mike Macdonald, is would John really go back to Jim and take Mike, after, how it worked out last year? And I can say, yeah, I don't think that is going to be a hurdle. Like Jim was looking for a defensive coordinator, and John said, hey, I got a pretty good one. And he went down there and he had an excellent season. By any standards you don't want to look, Michigan had an excellent season, and what goes on, with the coaches, they mostly have excellent season too. So it helps them out. And you know what? McDonald, who's 34 years old right now, they'll say, well, he doesn't have the experience. Like Sean McVay, who's coaching the Rams in the NFC Championship game, was hired when he was 30 years old as a head coach of the NFL. You're telling me McDonald, who got his experience as a DC and is now 34 years old, wouldn't be looked at as a viable candidate? He is. That's not clickbait. I mean, but am I saying that they're going out there and making the hire? I don't know that part. I'm just saying that I don't think it's a hurdle with the experience that people are making it like, oh, I don't think he's ready. He's ready. He's ready. Or I also don't think that it's a hurdle where you say, well, would John take Jim? Because, yeah, they both want each other to succeed. But you also, when you're talking about, McDonald might, he had been an NFL guy. He might want to be an NFL guy, just like Jim might want to be an NFL guy. So I'm going on and on about it. And, I do think that there would be a chance that he would be the DC there for John Harbaugh in Baltimore. And, maybe he's not, but it's not going to be because, I wouldn't go to Ann Arbor, and grab Jim's defensive coordinator. Yes, you would. And it wouldn't be because, we don't think he's ready to be a big-time defensive coordinator in the NFL. He was just a defensive coordinator in college. And if you look at the trend and the name of the game in the NFL, it's getting young, hot coordinators. And he fits that fits this profile. So whether or not he gets it or not, the reasons that are being said that he wouldn't, I just don't agree with. But, a Michigan fan watching this, hope he stays in Michigan. Continuity with the staff, just like, Jim Harbaugh coming back. It's going to feel like the end of the world if he leaves. It's not going to be. It's just going to feel like that. Certainly over the next 7 months, it's going to feel like that. And for McDonald leaving, would it feel like the end of the world? It wouldn't. I mean, he's been here for 1 year. That wouldn't feel like the end of the world. You'd put a question mark and you want him to stay. But it's not going to be the end of the world there either. Harbaugh would seem like the end of the world. McDonald, I don't think would feel like the end of the world. Although you want him to stay. That makes sense to everybody out there? All right. I'm glad. Make sure if you're listening on the podcast, I asked people to write reviews, and I asked a few times, and look, there's some reviews there. Thank you very much. If you're a subscriber and if you review, you get the just like you're in a car. Hey, you always give a 5-star. I've only used Uber a few times, so a couple times I've had great experiences. I'm always giving 5 stars. 5 stars. Let's go and write that review. Memorabilia Minute closing out. I just went to the stack of cards here, the Michigan cards, in here with a big basketball game tonight, Michigan against Northwestern. Here he is, Chris Webber, the Hall of Famer. Do you forget that he played for Golden State that first year? Orlando picked him, got the number 1 pick, and they didn't want to team him up with Shaq, so they traded him to Golden State. And then the next year, he was out, and here he was going to Washington when they were the Bullets. And I just look on the back here. Look at the trade. The Warriors traded Tom Gugliotta and 3 first-round picks to get Weber. A first-rounder in 96, 98, and 2000 for the Rookie of the Year. Can you imagine? Like Cade Cunningham, he had a great night last night, so people are talking about, hey, maybe Cade McNamara will be the Rookie of the Year. Could you imagine taking and Gugliotta wasn't a half bad player. He might even have been an all-star. Taking a fringe all-star player and 3 number 1s for Cade Cunningham. That's the kind of thing that went down. All right, a reminder, after the Michigan basketball game tonight, it's a 6:30 start, so a little bit earlier. Those games go a little bit over 2 hours, so around 8:35, 8:45. When the game's over, be right here on the Maize and Blue Review talking about Michigan and Northwestern immediately. Everything you need to know. I know you'll have people giving you 3 things that they learned about the game. We'll cover it all right here on the Maize and Blue Review. So we'll see you tonight. thanks for watching and do all those things that we talked about. Stay warm and see